Exposed by a hidden waterfall. How one woman's unexpected encounter transformed her life forever. In the small town of Maplewood, amidst the sterile walls of a corporate lab, Sarah Thompson felt her brilliance languish in the shadows. Sitting at the back of the conference room, the air thick with the clamor of self-important colleagues, she watched Thomas, her charming coworker, steal her ideas, wrapping them in his perfectly polished sentences. A fraying kettle of frustration and self-doubt simmered in her. It compounded with the pressure of trying to care for her ailing father, a once proud teacher who had drilled integrity into her very bones. How had she come to this? A silent witness to her future slipping through someone else's fingers, her hands clenched with longing yet shackled by responsibility. The weekend dawned with a longing for respite, a desperate need to shed her daily burdens. Sarah set off on a hike, her heart racing with the thrill of possibility. She hoped to find solace by a hidden waterfall she'd read about, the kind of place where she could breathe freely, if only for a moment. With every step into the lush green forest, the symphony of rustling leaves and chirping birds began to drown out her inner turmoil. But deep down, a whisper of fear lingered. What if this place didn't set her free at all? What if her reality, heavy and oppressive, was inescapable? As she reached the clearing, the cascade came into view, a majestic waterfall, a spray of purity and life. It was then that she met Anna, an artist with a liberated spirit, her weathered canvas bag slung over her shoulder. They exchanged pleasantries, and as Anna began to talk about her experiences battling prejudice in the art world, Sarah felt a spark ignite inside her. The words resonated like the waterfall's roar, stirring the stagnant waters of her own struggles. Could someone else see her, truly see her, as more than a background character? That flicker of hope felt foreign, yet intoxicating. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into weeks, and Anna became a catalyst for transformation. She encouraged Sarah to paint, to unleash her frustration onto the canvas. A brush in her hand felt like reclamation, every stroke releasing years of pent-up creativity. Soon, color spilled forth like the flowers springing up beside the trail, vibrant and demanding attention. Yet, with each canvas that came to life, a deeper conflict bloomed within her. Would this reprieve ever translate into professional dignity? Could the bruises of corporate indifference ever heal? As her artistic journey flourished, the pressure mounted. The weight of her revelations intertwined with the fear of returning to the lab. One chilly Thursday morning loomed, and Sarah clutched her portfolio. It was her truth, contribution so long overlooked. Would she find the courage to confront her boss? Would she dare to reclaim her missing integrity? Just as she rehearsed what she would say, the door swung open, and there was Thomas, with his smug grin and a report gripped in his hand, an obstacle threatening to unravel her newfound strength before she even began. Panic surged through her, heart racing again. The call of the waterfall echoed in her mind, a thundering reminder of cleansing and renewal. Would she speak her truth or retreat into the shadows once more? The weight of the moment hung thick, with stakes higher than ever. Her choice lay before her, yet all that pulsated through her was uncertainty. What awaited her on the other side of this confrontation? Only time would unveil her fate. The air in the conference room felt suffocating, an oppressive blanket of expectation and judgment. Thomas strutted across the floor, radiating confidence that Sarah could only dream of exuding. Her portfolio, her painstakingly crafted evidence of talent and innovative ideas, felt like a millstone around her neck. It represented not just her professional aspirations, but a longing for validation, a fear that her worth would remain unacknowledged unless she forced it into the light. The noise of the office seemed to fade into a dull hum as Sarah's mind scrolled through possible dialogues, yet none seemed potent enough to justify the years of suppression. She had spent too long in the role of the invisible woman, and no amount of rehearsing could change that reality unless she acted. Anna's faith in her talent sparked something that refused to be extinguished, yet the rigid corporate environment felt like a vice tightening around her resolve. With a quick intake of breath, Sarah straightened her shoulders and approached her boss's glass office. Each step felt heavier than the last, her pulse quickening in response to the thought of impending consequence. Would he dismiss her ideas again? Would he shrug off her efforts as inconsequential? The familiar dread clawed at her as she recalled the countless times her voice had been stifled. But at that moment, she refused to return to the past. As she reached his door, she knocked firmly, surprisingly steady. When invited in, she squared her jaw, fully aware that this confrontation was not merely about a portfolio. It was about reclaiming her sense of self. "Mr. Henderson," she began, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice, "I'd like to present some of my recent work." He glanced over the rim of his glasses, a bemused expression crossing his face. "Sarah, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but—" "No," she interjected, taking a step closer to his desk. "I've been in the background for too long. It's time you heard my ideas." The room vibrated with a boldness she hadn't anticipated finding within. As she unveiled her portfolio, the colors and images began to speak for her, each representation of her internal battles symbolized vividly on pristine white canvases. "This is where I found my voice. I have visions that have remained dormant." For the first time, words flowed out without hesitation. She immersed herself in the description of her pieces, an emotional landscape that mirrored her own struggles with self-assertion and creativity. Thomas had stepped in without warning, his polished demeanor casting a long shadow over her presentation. "Let's not kid ourselves, Sarah. You know the company values proven results," he remarked, shallow amusement lacing his voice, as if her efforts were nothing more than a passing whim. Her heart plummeted, anger flared within her. Thomas's words fed her doubts, his cynical expression ignited a potential flashpoint. She had the choice to shrink back, to retreat into her previous role, or stand her ground. Taking a deep breath, Sarah met his gaze, fueled by an amalgam of defiance and serenity. "If what I've created doesn't matter to you," she said with conviction, "then perhaps I don't belong here." With every ounce of courage coiling in her chest, she sensed a shift, a current of empowerment coursing through her. Would she risk it all for her autonomy, or would resignation steal her chance for growth? The stakes felt monumental. She was standing on the precipice, teetering between lingering fear and liberation. In that electric atmosphere it became clear, she would decide her own future. Then, as she prepared to make her final stand, someone knocked on the door. Before she could react, it swung open, revealing an unexpected visitor, Anna, with a bright smile and an armful of art supplies. The moment felt like an intrusion, yet somehow it also served as a reminder that support existed outside her corporate confines. "Have I arrived at the wrong time?" Anna questioned, her eyes glancing nervously between Sarah and Thomas. But Thomas, his expression shifting to irritation, was effectively caught off guard. Would this encounter fortify Sarah's resolve or shake it? The question hung palpably in the air, embedding itself between her hopes and despair as the office buzzed with tension. What new challenge awaited in the wake of this unexpected turnout? The room shifted with an almost tangible energy, Anna's presence sparking an unexpected thread of connection amid the brewing storm. Sarah stole a glance at Thomas, whose annoyance suddenly felt like an ancient relic, unable to touch the renewed vigor coursing through her veins. Anna's unwavering smile, a beacon of encouragement, reminded Sarah that perhaps the walls of corporate confinement had cracks that could be exploited. "Not at all," Sarah replied, her voice surprising even herself with its warmth. "I was just discussing my latest work with Mr. Henderson." Anna's bright eyes widened slightly as she turned to Thomas. "Amazing! I can't wait to hear about it. I brought some materials that might help inspire you even further, Sarah." "Materials?" Thomas sneered, the tension fracturing under his disdain. "Are we in a kindergarten art class, or are we running a business here?" The dismissal stung, but instead of retreating, Sarah felt the burn of defiance ignite anew. She held Anna's gaze, an unspoken understanding passing between them. This was the crux of her battle, not against Thomas alone, but against the silence that had once rendered her invisible. "Actually, Mr. Henderson," she interjected, "these materials represent a new approach I'm advocating for. We've been adhering to outdated methods that stifle creativity in our design process. Anna's supplies could symbolize a shift in our perspective." Thomas arched an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his face. "And you think crayons and paints are the answer? Be real, Sarah." His mockery only strengthened her resolve. "Perhaps it isn't about the tools themselves, but rather about the innovation they embody." There was a moment of silence, a palpable pause where ideas danced like fragile butterflies. Sarah recognized this was a battlefield, and she needed to wield her words like weapons. "We need to invite new ideas and perspectives if we want progress. What if I incorporate these materials into a live project? Let's see what fresh narratives they can inspire. As she spoke, she sensed a weight lifting off her shoulders, each word dragging a layer of impenetrable doubt from her mind. Thomas's intertwining expression of disbelief morphed into a fleeting glimmer of concern, perhaps even uncertainty. "You're proposing a project that relies on whimsy and art, then?" he scoffed, but his tone faltered. "Exactly," she responded, a level of excitement cresting within. "Creativity isn't confined to spreadsheets and metrics. Sometimes it's the unpredictable that brings about the revolutionary." With every challenge she issued to Thomas, she felt the blurred contours of her past dissolve. It wasn't merely about him or the portfolio. It was about allowing herself the grace of authenticity and allowing her talents to emerge undistorted. Anna stepped closer, her enthusiasm tangible. "I can help with the execution, Sarah. Let's make this happen." Sarah's heart raced, not from trepidation but exhilaration. This was an unfamiliar territory, asserting her ambitions in a concrete manner. It felt empowering, and ignited an idea of something much larger than she had considered before. What if this was more than just an art project? What if it could catalyze a transformation within the company, within herself? "Let's transform how we think about creativity in this environment," she suggested, her tone now commanding. The atmosphere felt charged, laced with the potential of both conflict and growth. Sarah could see the faintest sign of reconsideration on Thomas's face. He hadn't fully dismissed her yet. Perhaps her confrontation had grazed the edge of his certainty. However, a tight knot of anxiety still anchored within her. Was it truly enough to challenge established structures? Or would the confrontation with Thomas only see her ambitions suffocated? Before she could articulate her next thought, a rapid knock echoed through the room again, as if fate had a hand in shaping this moment. "Mr. Henderson, there are crucial updates on our pending projects," a junior executive called from the hallway. "It's urgent." The distraction thrust Sarah back on the precipice of uncertainty. She caught Anna's eye, and they shared an unspoken agreement, a commitment to push forward. This was their moment, a turning point that could dictate their future endeavors. What would it take to forge this path when the landscape was still shifting? As Thomas turned his attention toward the door, Sarah realized that she stood on the brink of a crusade. It was time to carve her narrative through the terrain of commercial indifference. But would she find the strength to see it through once the other contenders returned? The door swung open with a jarring creak, pulling everyone's attention as the junior executive hurried in. She quickly launched into a barrage of updates, reciting figures, timelines, and stressors that seemed to drown out the moment Sarah had been preparing to seize. The air thickened with a familiar corporate gravity, and Sarah felt herself teetering between excitement and despair as the opportunity slipped from her grasp. But then she noticed Anna's gaze, unwavering and encouraging. It was as if her presence was anchored to Sarah's determination, propelling her forward. As the room buzzed with urgency around her, Sarah felt her frustrations distill into a single thought. She would not allow this moment to fade into the background noise. While the junior executive rattled off details, Sarah consciously steeled her posture, preparing to interject. She realized that waiting for the perfect opportunity would simply allow Thomas to reclaim the narrative. Stepping into the fray, she raised her hand. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice echoing with newfound clarity. Everyone turned to her, surprised. The room contracted, and even the junior executive tilted her head, momentarily caught off guard at the sight of Sarah, an unexpected force. "We can integrate our updates into a creative project that addresses these concerns directly. It's a chance to infuse innovation into our processes." Thomas's eyes narrowed, skepticism clouding his features again, but Sarah refused to buck under his critical gaze. "What I propose could actually amplify our productivity," she continued. Her voice strengthened, fueled by the specter of her past doubts. "Let's combine the analytical with the creative. This isn't just about art. It's about heightening engagement through genuine collaboration. Let's design a system that rallies around this creative approach." The very act of speaking up felt like a liberation for Sarah. She was articulating her vision not merely for herself, but for the entire team, a chance to transform how they interacted with their work. There was power in clarity. She felt the energy shift. The initial tension in Thomas curved slightly as he processed her words. A moment flickered, a glimmer of curiosity breaking through his hardened armor. She seized it. "Imagine a workspace where everyone contributes not only numbers but ideas, where our meetings don't just churn out reports but brainstorms," Sarah pressed on. "This is an invitation for us to challenge how we've always done things. We can create an approach that actually resonates with everyone here." Anna's excited nod fueled Sarah's confidence. This wasn't just her fight, it was a shared mission. She inwardly acknowledged that she had been lurking in shadows too long, leaning against walls of wrong assumptions about her role in this environment. Her voice thrummed with life, each word buoyed by an urgency she hadn't felt before, a fierce intent to be seen and heard. But then, the crackle in the air returned. The tension was palpable as Thomas turned slightly, that familiar skepticism curling back onto his lips. "Is this really a viable strategy, or are we just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks?" He shot back, a shadow flitting across the room. "Maybe it is," she countered, the fire in her gut reigniting at his push. "But it's a risk we need to take if we want to thrive. Innovation doesn't come from safety, it comes from bold moves, precisely what our competitors might be exploiting as we speak." There was a moment when silence enveloped the room again, but this time it felt different. The energy morphed from skepticism into contemplation, as if a potential path lay illuminated by her assertions. The notion that Sarah could redefine her role, collaborate, and actively reshape the company's trajectory began to anchor itself in her thoughts. Just then, the subtle echo of footsteps outside the door reminded her that there were more forces at play. Sarah steeled herself, knowing that uncertainty would soon mingle with opportunity. The coming days would challenge her to confront not only Thomas, but also her own doubts regarding her worthiness to take center stage in this evolving narrative. Would she be able to harness this moment of connection, or would external pressures, both Andy's return and the weight of each decision, complicate her quest anew? As the conversation resumed, Sarah could feel the ground shifting once more beneath her feet, and she was determined to keep her footing this time. The time had come to face both her external adversaries and the inner voice that whispered fear. What awaited her at the end of this tumultuous journey she was now on? With the meeting's energy oscillating between newfound curiosity and lingering skepticism, Sarah found herself more aware of her own heartbeat than ever before. She could sense the weight of her colleagues' eyes, examining her both as a professional and a person, weighing their opinions against the sudden shift in her demeanor. This was not just another day at the office. It felt like the moment the waters began to ripple before a waterfall, preparing her for an inevitable plunge. As the discussions continued, she tuned in and out, her mind racing. The clock ticked loudly, echoing her growing concerns. Was she truly prepared to defend her ideas against Thomas's old-school mentality? Would anyone else embrace her vision, or would they continue clinging to familiar, stale processes? That evening, after the meeting had concluded, Sarah remained at her desk, surrounded by the soft hum of the office's computers and the faint scent of stale coffee. The whiteboard stood before her, cluttered with half-formed ideas. She stared at it, the words blurring into a single poignant question. What did she want to achieve? In that silence, the truth emerged from beneath her layers of anxiety. This was an opportunity, not just for her team, but for her evolving self. What if she could lead the way? What if innovation did not merely mean different numbers, but different stories? She needed a strategy, a call to arms for the creativity she felt bubbling beneath the surface, threatening to overflow. Pushing her doubts aside, she opened her notebook and began to outline a proposal. Despite the late hour, the soft glow of her desk lamp felt like a spotlight illuminating her purpose. She noted down strategies that combined analytics with creative solutions. She envisioned workshops, idea sessions, and even a monthly challenge where everyone could contribute creatively, not just while crunching numbers, but also during strategic planning. With each clumsy scribble on the page, her confidence burgeoned. She could feel the thrill coursing through her veins, that same excitement she had felt speaking up in the meeting. Yet, lurking beneath it was the gnawing awareness that Thomas would not concede easily. His skepticism was a formidable barrier, one that would not only challenge her approach, but also test her resolve. The following day, Sarah set a meeting with Anna to discuss her proposal. If anyone could share the burden of presenting this vision to the larger team, it would be Anna. They had shared insights and experiences, and Anna's belief in Sarah's capabilities felt like wind beneath her wings. When they sat down together, Anna's enthusiasm sparked something in Sarah. "You've really thought this through," Anna observed, her eyes glimmering as she perused Sarah's notes. There was something reassuring about having an ally, someone willing to share the risk and joy of new ideas. "I can see this resonating with others, especially if we present it right." Emboldened, Sarah plotted their approach. They would begin by garnering support from softer stakeholders, those who often felt overshadowed but could bring fresh perspectives. The last thing Sarah wanted was an immediate confrontation with Thomas. She'd rather build an army of collaborators first. For the next few days, Sarah shifted into high gear, networking and connecting in ways she had previously shied away from. She initiated casual lunch meetings, asked for feedback, and took note of everyone's insights. It wasn't merely about her idea anymore. It was turning into a shared mission, slowly forging connections, and a growing sense of community around her vision. But just as momentum began to build, an unexpected twist became her undoing. Andy returned unexpectedly, walking into the office as though he owned the place. His mere presence sent jolts of anxiety through her. Would her hard-earned goodwill crumble under old dynamics and unresolved tensions? Determined not to backslide into the doubts of her past, Sarah braced herself for the new challenges Andy's return would bring. The impending confrontation with her past roiled within her, a tumultuous wave at the threshold of her newfound clarity. Would she allow fear to steer her course, or could she leverage this moment as another stepping stone toward her ultimate goal? The inevitability of conflict loomed large, but so too did the flicker of hope ignited by her own audacity. As she shot anxious glances in Andy's direction, Sarah felt the battlefield shifting once more, confronting her with the same urgent question that stirred inside her. Was she ready to dive into her own depths, or would she linger at the edge of the waterfall, weighed down by uncertainty? The next morning, the office buzzed with an undercurrent of tension. Sarah arrived early, determined to claim the narrative before Andy could disrupt her momentum. She poured herself a cup of coffee, rallying her thoughts while the rich aroma filled her senses. Each sip fortified her resolve, reminding her why she was here, to help shift the culture within the team and prove to herself that she could lead. As her colleagues began arriving, Sarah forced herself to appear composed. Greetings from familiar faces felt like glances through a veil, their motivations and her own mingling in an uncomfortable dance. She was acutely aware of how these interactions were tinged with anticipation, the unspoken friction of old dynamics just under the surface. Then, there was Andy. Sensing his presence before she even turned around, a knot tightened in her stomach. When she did glance in his direction, the sight of him, leaning casually against the doorframe with a relaxed smirk, knocked her off balance. How could he be so unbothered when so much had changed? Undeterred, she reminded herself that his composed exterior was a mask, one that couldn't obscure the cracks in their past. Reinvigorated by her plan, Sarah headed to the conference room to prepare her initial proposal for discussion. Anna had agreed to join her a little later, but for now, she would stand alone. The whiteboard loomed large behind the long table, a blank canvas ready for their collective ideas to come to life. Sarah grabbed a marker, her pulse quickening as she wrote down innovation strategy in bold, intentional strokes. Every word she plotted felt like a declaration. She summed up their discussions from the previous weeks, creative workshops, idea openers, and the value of collaboration. Each point solidified her emerging role within the team, showcasing not only her vision, but also her competency. Yet, there remained the nagging thought: how would Thomas and Andy receive these ideas? As she gathered her notes, Anna slipped into the room, radiating enthusiasm. "I'm excited for this, Sarah." Anna's optimism was infectious. "I think we have a real chance to shift things, especially if we frame it right." Sarah felt a surge of energy. Together they elaborated their ideas, strategizing on messaging that would appeal to the team while softening the edges for Thomas and dispelling any doubts Andy might sow. It wasn't about undermining anyone, but rather inviting them into a more vibrant professional dialogue. However, just before they made their way back to the open office, Andy ambushed them. "What's this? Team bonding through meetings? Sounds fun," he said, his tone heavily laced with sarcasm. The old tension surged back, a cresting wave threatening to pull her under. Sarah braced herself, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. "Actually, it's about fostering new strategies that could benefit everyone, Andy. We're looking to innovate and expand our discussions, not just through reports, but through collaboration." She shot back, her voice steadier than she felt. He studied her, his expression unreadable. In that instant, Sarah realized she was staring at the very barrier she had been preparing to hurdle. There were layers of history wrapped in each of Andy's quips, and part of her feared the potential for a public confrontation that could leave her exposed. "Collaboration? Rather ambitious for someone who's only ever followed the rules," he retorted. But there was something in the way he said it, a flicker of challenge. Without breaking eye contact, Sarah stepped forward, her heart racing. "Being ambitious is how we grow. I'm not just following rules. I'm trying to rewrite them to elevate this team." As she spoke, the energy in the room shifted. Colleagues began to gather, ears piqued by her unexpected declaration. A sense of determination coursed through her. This was no longer just about ideas, it was about asserting her place and her potential. Waves of uncertainty washed over her, but they no longer felt like restraints. Instead, they prompted clarity. She was ready to confront this moment and to delve forward despite the turbulence. But as the assembled colleagues murmured their interpretation of the exchange, Sarah couldn't help but sense a crack in her strategy. Was it possible for that old animosity to fuel constructive change? While her ambition surged, a chilling thought crept into her mind. If she dared reach for the future, would she expose weaknesses in herself that she had long hidden, or worse, in her allies? As silence enveloped the room, Sarah stood at a precipice, waiting for the next move. Would she leap forward into the unknown, or would she find herself hesitating once again, caught between hope and the haunting specters of her past? The silence felt suffocating, a heavy blanket that wrapped around Sarah. She could feel the tension ripple through her colleagues, their eyes shifting between her and Andy, waiting for the next act of this unfolding drama. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears, urging her to take action. And yet, doubt nibbled at the edges of her confidence. What if she miscalculated? What if this moment turned against her? But as she stood there, gazes lingering like specters, Sarah clenched her fists, forcing the apprehension to recede. This wasn't merely about her vision for the team. It held the potential for her personal transformation. She was tired of being overshadowed, and if she faltered now, the chance to redefine her narrative would slip away like sand through her fingers. "Look," she began, her voice breaking through the tension. "This isn't just about meetings. It's about creating opportunities for everyone in this team to contribute and grow. We've settled into our comfort zones for too long, and that's stifling our creativity." There was a resoluteness in her tone she hadn't felt before. The words poured out, fueled by years of yearning to be heard. Andy's brow furrowed, skepticism interlaced with intrigue. "Opportunities? You really think a few brainstorming sessions are going to change the game? People don't suddenly become innovative just because they're invited to participate." He leaned in, eyes narrowing slightly, his arrogance a familiar provocation. "Maybe they don't," Sarah countered, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "But if we don't try, nothing will change. We need to break the cycle. Innovation doesn't happen in isolation. It comes from collaboration, from every single person in this room." The words hung in the air, challenging the very foundation of their established dynamics. In that moment, something shifted. Colleagues began actively engaging with the idea, murmuring in agreement, and Sarah could see a flicker of support. Anna's nod, David's thoughtful expression. She realized that her conviction had sparked intrigue, something that had been dormant for far too long. Yet Andy's smirk didn't fully dissipate. "Let's see then. How do you plan to involve everyone? Do you even know what specific steps you'd take?" His tone was almost inviting a challenge, and Sarah sensed a delicate game unfolding in front of her. Determined not to retreat, she recalibrated her approach. "We create a framework. It begins with a series of workshops that address our individual strengths, followed by collaborative sessions where we can devise strategies in real time. We can start small and grow based on what works." Each word crystallized her vision further. This was concrete, actionable, a roadmap to her ambitions. "Sounds like quite the undertaking," he replied, more as a neutral observer than the skeptical antagonist. "Are you really ready to lead that dance?" The question was laden with implications, both challenging and oddly intriguing. The thought echoed, lead that dance. Was she? Beneath the bravado of her words, Sarah felt the unease swell, but something deeper urged her to embrace it. Yes, she was ready. For herself, for her team. And what if it's not about leading the dance, but inviting everyone to join in and create something new together? The proposition hung in the air, daring them to embrace the uncertain endeavor. As discussions began to revolve around logistics and team involvement, Sarah's heartbeat quickened. This was growth. This was movement. The energy in the room shifted, a palpable sense of potential lingering in the air. But the looming shadow of her doubts remained. Was inviting others in truly the answer, or would it lead to exposing her own insecurities and vulnerabilities? The deeper she committed to transforming the team, the more uncertain she felt about her place within it. Questions swirled in her mind as the conversations began to take shape. As she prepared to muster the courage to solidify her proposals to Thomas, another thought emerged, sharp and vivid. Could she sustain this momentum? Would the support she felt wane under scrutiny? Yet despite the uncertainty gnawing at her will, Sarah took a breath and quieted her doubts. "This is just the beginning," she assured herself. "Change starts with a single step." As she exhaled, she glanced around the room, absorbing the faint murmurs taking root: optimism, doubt, ambition, and worry. It was then she understood that all these feelings coexisted, each one a vital part of their shared journey forward. But just as a sense of resolve settled, the inimitable thought struck. If they were to push ahead, they would indeed have to confront more than just logistics or strategic plans. They were standing at the brink of an emotional undertaking that could reveal much more than just professional capabilities. Would her team embrace this new beginning, or would the ghosts of past failures haunt her efforts? As the meeting continued to evolve, Sarah steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that true growth often rose from the ashes of discomfort. The time had come to face more than just Andy. It was time to quell the fears that had stifled her for too long. And somewhere in those thoughts, a deeper realization emerged. The forthcoming challenge wouldn't merely be about promoting innovation. It would be about redefining who she was in both the eyes of her colleagues and herself. Her heart thrummed with purpose as she moved deeper into the conversation, ready for whatever surprise awaited her. As the meeting droned on, Sarah could feel the weight of anticipation transforming into tangible energy pulsing around her. With each question she answered, each new idea she shared, the sense of partnership coalescing within the team invigorated her spirit. The art of persuasion was becoming less of a chore and more a thrilling dance of connection. Her mind raced with strategies and possibilities, planting seeds of innovation that she hoped would bloom in the weeks ahead. Yet, beneath that thrill was a whisper of hesitation. How long could this newfound synergy last? What might happen when the initial enthusiasm waned? These doubts circled her mind like sharks, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike. She couldn't allow them to take hold. Not now, when she was on the brink of something transformative. When the meeting finally adjourned, a subtle exhilaration lingered within her. Colleagues drifted away, engaged in lively discussions sparked by her proposals, their faces reflecting a mix of hope and curiosity. Sarah lingered a moment longer, stealing a glance at Andy, who was now uncharacteristically silent, the skepticism in his demeanor visibly eroded. It was an opening, but she wouldn't count her victories too soon. As she gathered her things, Anna approached her, a bright smile illuminating her face. "I think you really got through to everyone today. It felt like a breath of fresh air." "Thanks, Anna," Sarah replied, her heart warming at the unexpected validation. "I hope they keep that momentum going." "You have to keep pushing," Anna insisted, her tone earnest. "We need someone in this team willing to challenge the status quo. You could be that person. Just don't forget where you started." Her words struck Sarah with a thoughtful pang. She recalled her own early days, unsure, hesitant. It was easy to forget that everyone began somewhere and that vulnerability could be a source of strength. "Maybe you're right," Sarah mused. "But what if I stumble?" "Then you get up," Anna replied, her smile unwavering. "That's how we grow. You've already taken the hardest step." As Anna wandered off, Sarah's mind churned. Each conversation, each moment of affirmation, ignited a fire within her. She was beginning to glimpse the leader she could become, yet the shadows of her past loomed large. She could still feel that familiar tug of fear, questioning whether she truly had the capacity to inspire sustained change. The following few days unfolded into a whirlwind of activity. Sarah threw herself into organizing workshops, meticulously curating activities intended to unearth her colleagues' strengths. She researched best practices in team collaboration and innovation, eager to find methods that might resonate with her unique group. The once distant dream of being a catalyst for change was inching closer to reality. However, with every ounce of dedication she poured into the preparations, the self-doubt twisted tighter within her chest. What if these workshops didn't yield results? What if, despite her efforts, the endeavor fell flat? These questions plagued her during quiet moments, overshadowed by the relentless drive to succeed. One afternoon, as she scrutinized the feedback she had received from a preliminary group of colleagues, a jarring notification flashed on her phone. It was a message from Thomas, a meeting request with no indication of the agenda. Her stomach tightened. The anticipation of this conversation filled her with both hope and dread. Had he seen the potential of her ideas, or was he preparing to dismantle her vision? Determined to answer this question, Sarah decided to approach the meeting with utmost resolve. She would not allow fear to dictate her actions. She would embrace the uncertainty and pave the way through it. Yet, lurking beneath her newfound determination was a whisper, an exhausting reminder of her insecurities. Could she truly uphold the trust that had begun to amass within her team? As she prepared for the meeting, a swirl of emotions descended upon her. Anxiety, excitement, and a flickering flame of confidence. Yet the reflection that stared back at her on her computer screen didn't fully illuminate the person she aspired to become. Was she ready to stand in the light of scrutiny, willing to face possible failure head-on? With her resolve hardening, Sarah stepped into her shoes, straightened her back, and inhaled deeply. It was time to confront her ongoing battle, not just with Thomas, but with the fluctuating perceptions of who she could be. And as she reminded herself that growth often demanded discomfort, she acknowledged the moment that awaited her, the chance to lay bare her vision, inching closer to the leader within. Yet, as she pressed send to confirm her attendance, a tremor of uncertainty crept through her. What if this time, it wasn't just her professional capabilities on the line, but her very sense of self? That question pulsating in her mind hinted at a deeper truth she had yet to navigate. The real test was not merely what she would present to Thomas, but how she would reconcile her past doubts with her future ambitions. She was standing at the threshold of transformation, and within that threshold lay danger and opportunity. Would she emerge prepared to articulate her vision against the looming doubts, or would the weight of her fears drown out the growing leader within? As the clock ticked closer to her meeting, the air around her felt electric, charged with tension and potential. As Sarah walked into the meeting room, the hum of voices subsided, replaced by the anticipatory silence of her colleagues. Thomas sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, an enigma wrapped in tailored professionalism. She felt the weight of their collective gaze upon her, probing for weakness, for certainty, and for a glimpse of the vision she was yet to fully define. Her stomach flipped as she positioned herself opposite him. "Thanks for joining us, Sarah," Thomas said, his tone measured. "I was hoping we could have a candid discussion about your recent proposals." With each word, she sensed the gravity of this moment intensifying. Her heart raced in sync with the pulse of anxiety coursing through her veins. This was more than just a discussion. It was an unveiling of her nascent identity, her aspirations laid bare. "Absolutely, Thomas. I believe our team has incredible potential," she responded, careful to exude confidence. Yet inside, a storm raged. Could she back up her words with substance? She had worked tirelessly to craft a collaborative culture, but the fear of judgment loomed large. "Tell us what you envision," he prompted, the room's energy shifting as all attention coalesced around her. Taking a deep breath, she summoned clarity among the chaos. Focusing on her recent workshops and their potential impact, she articulated ideas that sparked enthusiasm among her colleagues. Reflections surfaced in her mind, opportunities for growth, collaboration, and innovation. Each point she made felt like an emerging beacon, pulling her away from the insecurities that had haunted her for years. Yet, as she spoke, a creeping realization dawned upon her. The very act of sharing her ideas exposed a deeper vulnerability. What if they don't respond positively? The notion clawed at her confidence, momentarily derailing her rhythm. But this time, she wouldn't succumb to doubt. Instead of retreating, she leaned in, welcoming the discomfort of being visible. Each affirmation from her peers surged like a tonic. Nods and smiles rekindled her resolve, her voice steadying as she shared her vision for driving collective ambition. Just as she felt momentum building, Thomas interjected, "You offer great ideas, but you've yet to address how we'll implement them effectively. What if resources are limited? What if your strategies don't garner the desired responses?" His skepticism pierced her burgeoning confidence, and immediately doubt skittered back into her thoughts. In that moment, Sarah felt the weight of self-judgment rise from her subconscious. She could feel the edges of vulnerability curling back toward her. Was she floundering, caught in the quicksand of expectations? But then she remembered Anna's words. Growth required confronting challenges head-on. So she took a decisive breath, preparing to articulate not just a plan, but also the rational underpinnings that had fueled her enthusiasm. "I understand the concerns, Thomas. However, I've outlined a phased approach, one that allows us to test strategies incrementally and collect feedback from the team along the way. By integrating continuous improvement, we can reassess and pivot without significant strain on our resources." She glanced around the table. The shifting dynamics of their expressions hinted at surprise and interest. Perhaps her passion was spilling over, seeping into the team, igniting curiosity rather than resistance. Yet even amidst the warmth of encouragement, a lingering question nudged at her consciousness. Would her proposal withstand the scrutiny it so desperately invited? After a brief silence, Thomas leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. "That's an interesting perspective, Sarah, but let's talk about your process and how you'll foster collaboration going forward. Can this approach truly cultivate a trusted environment?" Her pulse quickened, the stakes had elevated again. This was a direct challenge to her emerging leadership, an opportunity for deeper reflection. Trust, I believe, is born from transparency. By creating an open feedback loop, we empower the team to communicate freely, share insights, and collectively shape our outcomes. It's essential that they feel ownership of the process, she countered. Each exchange felt like a clash of wills, her convictions tested against the pragmatism of reality. Yet in that tension, she sensed growth, testing her thoughts against the boundaries of her fears. As the meeting continued, the conversation shifted into rich dialogue. Colleagues chimed in, echoing her sentiments, embellishing her ideas with their insights. The room intertwined with a rare synergy, and suddenly, the past and its haunting doubts faded from view, if only momentarily. However, just as Sarah began to embrace this shift, a tremor of realization struck her. This spark of collaboration could just as easily flicker out. She clenched her fists beneath the table, summoning every ounce of resolve to aim higher. She was still battling those echoes of past hesitation, and the meeting was just a beginning. With the meeting reaching its crescendo, Sarah understood the real test lay ahead. Could she harness this energy and sustain it? Could she differentiate herself from her old self in ways that mattered, defining not only her role, but the culture she aimed to cultivate? As she wrapped up her thoughts, a new question emerged. What if this was merely the beginning of her challenges? The room filled with a charged silence, and all eyes turned to her for final thoughts. In that instrumental moment, Sarah resolved to face the uncertain horizon not merely as an option, but as an obligation. How could she ensure this initial enthusiasm blossomed into a lasting transformation? And as these questions bubbled to the surface, she realized her journey was just beginning, teetering on the brink of profound change. The room pulsed with potential, and Sarah understood one immutable truth. The fight to prove herself was far from over. Inwardly, the battle raged on. Would she rise with her vision intact, or would she risk losing everything in the name of ambition? In the weeks that followed, Sarah embraced the tumult of her journey, stepping into her role as both a leader and a change agent. The meeting was just the catalyst, an ignition that sparked the collaborative revolution she longed for within the sterile confines of the lab. The first workshop, which she initially approached with trepidation, morphed into an unrepeatable success. Colleagues, once guarded and cynical, embraced the opportunity to explore their creativity, sharing ideas that echoed like music across the room. Amidst the laughter and innovation, Sarah witnessed the unmistakable transformation of her environment. The feedback loop she had implemented thrived. Colleagues exchanged thoughts candidly, each voice contributing to a collective chorus of creativity. Ideas flourished like wildflowers, no longer confined to the shadows of colleagues overshadowing one another. Sarah's vision of a trusting, empowered team began to crystallize, a tangible altitude above the emotional landscape she once navigated with caution. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Internal resistance resurfaced, particularly from Thomas and Andy, who vehemently opposed the shakeup of their accepted norms. They leveled their doubts, attempting to regain control and challenge the momentum she had sparked. Yet, empowered by newfound confidence, Sarah met these challenges head-on. She maintained her composure even as doubts threatened to anchor her back in the past. Innovation often lies beyond the familiar, she would assert, her voice grounded in determination when pushed to justify her direction. Every question they asked fueled her responses, infusing her emerging leadership with more authenticity. The core of unwavering resolve ran deep. Each demonstration of her newfound clarity brought waves of affirmation that drowned her previous anxieties. Sarah recognized that every ounce of skepticism propelled her to fortify her foundation, pushing her to articulate her vision with ever bolder conviction. As days stretched into weeks, recognition began to take root. Sarah was invited to share her experiences at a regional meeting, a milestone reflecting how her contributions had transformed the team's workflow. Colleagues applauded her initiative and her steadfastness. She was shifting the culture, no longer just a cog in a machine. She had become a recognized innovator. Yet in these pivotal moments, it was the quiet reflections that resonated most profoundly within her. Standing at the podium, presenting to peers and leaders alike, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. The passion that had once been a mere whisper burgeoned into a powerful proclamation, echoed by her commitment to nurture creativity and collaboration. With every interaction, Sarah carved a niche where her ideas were validated, her efforts acknowledged. It was no longer about just resisting corporate indifference. It was about thriving amidst it, transforming barriers into bridges. At home, while caring for her father, she shared stories of her experiences, his pride illuminating the room. Realizing her efforts were recognized both professionally and personally became an intoxicating realization, and it filled her with solid confidence. Her father's belief that no integrity lost could be reclaimed transformed into a force, propelling her to establish her voice defiantly. By the time the season changed, she had accomplished a distinct personal achievement. She was appointed to lead a new strategic creative initiative, acknowledging her dual strengths as an artist and a professional. The journey from the quiet, invisible figure in the corner of a boardroom to a pivotal force in the company had brought genuine fulfillment. Each doubt that lingered had instead propelled her to heights she once thought unattainable. Sarah stood now, recognized not just in the lab, but within the annals of her own evolving narrative, an embodiment of resilience and transformation. The echoes of the hidden waterfall mingled with her triumph, a backdrop where she discovered her true self. She had proven not just her competence but forged an unwavering connection to her purpose. As she reflected on her journey, a newfound clarity fueled her ambitions. This was the moment of transformation, a culmination of growth, creativity, and her unwavering commitment to herself and her colleagues. The world around her had changed, but more importantly, she had changed. She had conquered fear, embraced her voice, and now she stood ready to take on future challenges with solid resolve. It's essential to take ownership of your narrative, to recognize the power within you that can reshape not just your environment, but your very existence. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.